The Private Investigators Convention. Welcome to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast, where we dig into the unsolved, the unusual, and the unforgettable. This week we're heading back to the glittering year of 1950, when Toronto's Royal York Hotel played host to a gathering unlike any other, an international convention in the world's top private eyes. The chandeliers sparkled, the eagles clashed, and before the week was through, someone wound up dead. Amid the champagne toasts and whispered rivalries, one thing became clear. When the best detectives in the world are all suspects, who do you call to solve the case? You call Mick McCathie and Mack MacNeely, Toronto's finest, and maybe only hope for getting to the bottom of a mystery where everyone thinks they're the smartest person in the room. So grab your trench coat, shine your shoes, and keep your wits sharp. This is the Private Investigators Convention, a Mick and Mack mystery. Chapter 1. Opening Remarks. The Royal York Hotel had seen its share of dignitaries, diplomats, and dubious deals in smoky corners. But never before had it played host to quite this many trench coats, monocles, and highly polished egos under one roof. Mick McCathie adjusted the brim of his brown fedora and peered up at the towering lobby ceiling. Ever feel like we wandered into a detective story written by a fellow who's had one too many brandies, he muttered. Beside him, Mack MacNeely let out a low whistle, eyeing the crowd of tweed jackets, velvet capes, and walking sticks swirling around them. Peacocks with magnifying glasses. Seen less plumage at a feather merchant's convention. They passed a sharp-eyed woman wearing a silver brooch shaped like a dagger, who nodded curtly and took a discreet note in a leather-bound notebook. Somewhere nearby, a monocle gleamed in the chandelier light. Mick exhaled. Don't let the costumes fool you. There's a lot of brains in this room. Mack grinned. Yeah, then maybe one of them can help me find the bar. Across the lobby, Johnny Chandler and Vicky Langford were trying, without much success, to blend in. Vicky, radiant in a midnight blue dress, waved off yet another congratulatory handshake. We haven't even gotten the award yet, she whispered through her smile. I feel like a fraud. Johnny tugged at his cuffs, visibly uncomfortable in formal wear. You're not a fraud, Vicky, and you're a better detective than half these international imports. I'm just a guy with a pencil mustache and a lucky tie. A booming voice cut through the chatter. Ladies and gentlemen, the grand ballroom is now open for tonight's gala. Please make your way inside. The crowd flowed like champagne into the ballroom. Gilded ceilings, gleaming parquet floors, and a band playing something halfway between jazz and overconfidence. Waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of bubbling cocktails, and laughter echoed off the walls like gunshots at a polite distance. At the head table sat a lineup of legends. There was Jean-Baptiste Lemaitre, the Belgian sleuth with a waxed mustache and eyes like needles. Next to him, Lord Archibald Fontley, twirling a cigarette holder and looking deeply bored. And across from them, Rick Bannon, trench coat on indoors, tie loosened, eyes scanned the exits like he expected a shootout. Quite a lineup, Mack whispered to Mick. Yup, Mick replied. Not a one of them could find a good sandwich in this town if their lives depended on it. The speeches began, pompous, congratulatory, just a side of unbearable. Mortimer Vale, the Everton publisher of the International Investigator, took the podium with a champagne flute in one hand and his own ego in the other. We are gathered here to celebrate the best and brightest in our field, he intoned. From the windswept back streets of Paris to the gumshoe gutters of San Francisco, to our very own homegrown heroes, Johnny Chandler and Miss Vicky Langford. Applause, a few standing ovations, a reluctant nod from Lemaitre, a dismissive sniff from Fontley, a slow clap from Bannon, who may have been applauding the open bar. Later that night, the party thinned out into drunken laughter and elevator dings. Mick and Mack were halfway through a nightcap when a bellhop burst in the lounge, pale as parchment. Someone call the police, he gasped. Mr. Vale's dead. Shot. Locked in his suite. Mick set down his glass. I guess we're not off duty after all. Mack grinned. See? You bring this many detectives into one hotel, someone's bound to drop dead before dessert. They followed the bellhop toward the east wing. As they reached the 14th floor, the crowd was already gathering. Whispers, speculations, at least one self-styled sleuth trying to preserve the crime scene by cordoning it off with his cummerbund. Mortimer Vale lay in the carpet, shot clean through the heart. A fountain pen lay beside him, snapped in half. The room was locked from the inside, no signs of forced entry. Just a neat, tidy mystery. Well, Mack said, looking down the body, guess the guy finally ran out of things to say. Mick squinted at the pen. Let's see who had a reason to silence him, and who had the key to get in without opening the door. Because in a hotel full of detectives, someone had just committed the perfect murder. Chapter 2. A Room Full of Suspects. The east wing of the Royal York smelled like aftershave cordite and freshly bruised pride. Detectives, real and fictional, swarmed the hallway outside Mortimer Vale's suite. Someone had fetched a fingerprint kit, someone else was sketching the crime scene for posterity, and two rival investigators were arguing over whether the wound indicated a left-handed killer or someone using reverse psychology. McCathie pushed through the crowd, flashing a badge he hadn't technically been asked to use. Mack trailed behind, eating a mint he liberated from the maitre d'. All right, back it up, Mick barked. Unless you're the killer or the coroner, I want you behind the velvet rope. A chorus of offended gasps rippled through the room like a genteel hurricane. You can't just barge in. I've solved 48 murders. I am the velvet rope. Good, Mack grinned, and you won't mind roping yourself off. Inside the suite, Vicky Langford crouched beside the body with a look that could cut glass. This isn't a robbery, she said crisply, rising. Too clean, too staged. Johnny stood stiffly behind her, arms crossed. We're guests of honor. The idea that he paused, catching his breath, that we'd be suspects is absurd. Mick gave a tired nod. Everyone in this hallway's a suspect, Johnny, including me, including Mack, and yes, including the guy with the monocle trying to pick the lock to the minibar. Lord Fauntleroy, Mack muttered. Looks like he's trying to deduct whether the scotch is single malt. Jean-Baptiste Lamothe arrived next, as if gliding on invisible rails. He surveyed the body with a theatrical frown, then dabbed delicately at his brow with a monogrammed handkerchief. This is a matter of the little grey cells, he announced, which I regret to inform you, most of you have never properly exercised. He turned pointedly away from Mick, who raised an eyebrow. I suppose you'll be solving this one all on your own, Mick asked. But of course, Lamothe replied, bowing slightly. I've already deduced the caliber, the trajectory, and the poetic irony of the crime. Let me know when you deduce the killer, Mack said. We're on a tight schedule. Across the room, Lord Archibald Fauntleroy reclined in the suite's fainting couch, swirling a glass of brandy as though auditioning for a scandal. Don't let me know when it's my turn to be interrogated, he drawled. I have a hair appointment at 10 and a hangover scheduled for noon. And in the corner, Rick Bannon topped off his flask and muttered, We'll all be dead by morning anyway. Mack blinked. Cheery fellow, that one. The suite itself told a curious story. No signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture. The only real disturbance, aside from the very dead publisher and the carpet, was a crumpled convention program left on the writing desk. Mick picked it up. Half of it was torn away, but on the back someone had scrawled two initials in ink. M.D. Nearby on the floor, a fountain pen lay snapped in half. Vicky gave it a glance and frowned. He was always scribbling notes. He had a fountain pen he loved, gold nib, mother of pearl barrel. That's not it, she said, nodding toward the broken pen. That one's cheap, disposable. The real one's missing. Maybe someone decided to claim it early, Mack muttered. Mick turned the program over again. M.D. Could be initials, could be a title. Medical doctor, Johnny offered. Marla Dubois, Vicky said quietly. They all looked at her. She had a row with Mortimer last week, Vicky added. Said he'd been digging into her work. Accused her of plagiarism. Said some of her stories weren't fiction at all. Mack whistled. Imagine that. Crime writer who's committing actual crimes. That's never been done, Fontley called from the couch. It has, Bannon said. Twice. One of them got away. Outside the suite, the mood had curdled into something taut and electric. The greatest detectives in the world were now the most obvious suspects, and each of them seemed either delighted or furious to be included. Mick handed the torn program to Vicky and adjusted his coat. We need to find the missing pen, he said. Figure out who hated Mortimer Vale enough to kill him. In a locked room, Mack finished. And with a hotel full of people whose job it is to solve murders. Vicky slipped the note into her clutch. Well, no pressure. Chapter 3. Red Herrings and Room Keys. Breakfast at the Royal York was unusually quiet that morning. A half-dozen world-renowned sleuths sat in silence over poached eggs and scandal. Lemaitre stirred his tea with theatrical delicacy. Lord Fontley wore sunglasses and a hangover. Rick Bannon drank his coffee like it had wronged him personally. Across the room, Mick and Mack held court in a quiet corner booth, a notepad between them and a pot of lukewarm coffee between sips. We've got too many suspects, Mack said, flipping a page, and too few facts. Par for the course, Mick muttered. But this time, all the suspects think they're the detectives. The interviews began. Marla Dubois arrived first, draped in red silk and righteous indignation. Her perfume hit the room 5 seconds before she did. Let me be perfectly clear, she said, sliding into the chair. I had nothing to do with Mortimer's death. Though I'll admit I won't miss his editorials. You two didn't get along, Mick asked. Marla let out a brittle laugh. Mortimer Vale threatened to publish a piece claiming my novels were lifted from real case files. Some of them Johnny Chandler's old cases. He said it had ruined me. Were they, Mack asked, half serious. Marla arched her brow. Darling, it's called research. Jean-Baptiste Lemaitre was next. He arrived with a furrowed brow, a velvet smoking jacket, and an air of offended genius. I was indisposed at the time of the murder, he said, drawing a bath. Scented oils, lavender. I regret I have no alibi beyond the bathwater. No one saw you, Mack asked. I do not bathe with witnesses, Lemaitre replied coldly. You sure, Mack muttered? There's a guy with a monocle. Seems like he'd volunteer. Lemaitre ignored him and fixed his gaze on Mick. For the record, I found Vale's tone lacking in elegance. His writing lacked subtlety. His threats were crude. But I do not kill men over literature. That would be barbaric. Mick jotted a note. No alibi, high motive, smells like lavender. Lord Fontley wandered in with a silk cravat and a faint scent of stale champagne. I appear to have misplaced my room key, he said with a shrug. Not unusual. I misplace things all the time, like humility. Your key could have opened Vale's suite, Mick said. Fontley waved him off. If I were going to kill the man, I wouldn't use a key. I'd use an untraceable South African blow dart and make it look like food poisoning. Really, gentlemen, if you think I'm the killer, you're insulting both of us. Mack leaned in. So where were you at the time of the murder? Dancing, Fontley said, briefly, then passed out in the coat room. I believe I had an extended conversation with a fur muff. Rick Bannon didn't come to them. They found him nursing a flask at the bar, watching the ice melt. I was drunk, he said flatly. Still am. You want to hate me for that? Get in line. Someone saw you near Vale's floor, Mick said. I wandered. Probably looking for ice, or something to forget I came to this circus. Anything you don't remember, Mack asked. Bannon looked up with a crooked grin. Most of the last 10 years. As the suspects thinned, Mack caught sight of a young man in a crisp hotel uniform fidgeting near the back of the ballroom. He had the distinct look of someone who knew something and didn't want to. "Hey," Mack called. "You work last night?" The staffer nodded nervously, smoothing his collar. "Yeah, banquet service. Why?" Mack flashed a friendly smile. "You deliver anything to Mr. Vale?" The kid hesitated and sighed. "I was paid $20 to slip a note under his door. No name, just an envelope. Real nice stationery." "Who paid you?" Mick asked, walking over. "I didn't get a name. A woman, blonde, Vale, said she was a guest. I figured it was a secret admirer thing." Mick exchanged a glance with Mack. "A blonde in a veil. That narrows it down to about 60% of the crime writers here." "Still got the cash?" Mack asked. The kid nodded. "Why?" "We'll take it," Mack said, holding out his hand, "and you'll forget we ever talked." Staffer handed over the 20 with a sheepish grin. Mick turned it over. Embossed in faint gold ink was a single name: the International Investigator. Mortimer Vale's own stationery. "Well," Mack said, tucking the bill into his coat, "either he paid himself to die, or someone knew exactly how to get him to open the door," Mick finished. He had a motive, a note, and a growing list of suspects. All they needed now was a killer. Chapter 4. The Vanishing Witness. The Royal York service hallway didn't see much glamour. Linoleum floors, humming pipes, and the occasional bellhop sneaking a cigarette. Wasn't the kind of place people lingered, especially not face down and unconscious. But that's exactly how they found the ballroom staffer. Same kid who delivered the mysterious note to Mortimer Vale. He was slumped behind a laundry cart, a goose egg swelling on the side of his head, and a dusting of sugar scattered around him, like confetti from the wrong kind of party. "Someone didn't want him talking," Mack said, kneeling beside him. "He's out cold." Mick looked around. No witnesses, just the silence of a hallway, and seemed more secrets than sunlight. "You only told us about the note an hour ago," Mick said. "Whoever hit him moved fast." "I knew exactly where to find him," Mack added grimly. "We need to find out who knew he talked." Mick sighed and stood. Or who had something to lose, if that note led anywhere. Upstairs in the conference lounge, Johnny Chandler and Vicky Langford sat side by side, piecing together what was quickly becoming less of a case and more of a trap. Vicky held the torn program delicately, turning it under the desk lamp's glow. The initials, M.D. "Marla Dubois," Johnny said. "Maybe, or maybe not." Vicky reached in her handbag and pulled out a slim, dog-eared paperback. The Crimson Widow, the latest bestseller by Marla Dubois. She flipped to the dedication page. "To M.D., it read, the muse who made murder marvelous." "Well," Max said, reading over her shoulder, "that's subtle." "More than that," Vicky said. "Her lead character, Madeline Drake, M.D. She's modeling Marla herself. Everyone knows it." Johnny frowned. So Vale planned to expose that her beloved detective was lifted from someone else's real-life cases? Vicky nodded. She might have written the note herself, lured him to his room with his own stationery, pinned it all in the initials. Only one thing more dramatic than that, Mack added, would be doing it in front of a live audience during a book signing. Johnny grimaced. "You know, if we weren't solving this, I'd probably be buying tickets." But the revelation came with a wrinkle. Mick returned from the concierge desk holding a thin, leather-bound folder, stamped the logo of the International Investigator. He tossed it on the table in front of Johnny. This was found in the publisher's safe. Marked confidential. Locked drawer. You know whose name's on the cover? Johnny looked and blinked. Me? Inside, clippings, case notes, surveillance photos. A few familiar, most not. Why would Vale have a file on me? Johnny asked. Good question, Mick said. Because he had one on almost everyone here. But yours was the thickest. Vicky flipped through a few pages. Johnny, some of these are your private cases, not public ones. Johnny paled. I never published these. Never shared them. Some of these clients, how the hell did he get this? Maybe he didn't, Mick said. Maybe someone else gave it to him. Someone with access. Johnny stood, suddenly flushed. You think I killed him to keep this quiet? No, Mick said, calm as still water. I think someone wanted it to look like you did. Mack leaned back in his chair. So let's review. Marla had motive. Lemaitre has no alibi. Fontley's key is missing. Bannon was drunk but conveniently near the crime scene. And now Vale's got a dossier on Chandler big enough to make the RCMP jealous. Our only witness, Mick added, just got knocked out in the laundry hall. Vicky looked at the folder, then at Johnny. You said once that no one could surprise you, she said softly. Johnny gave a hollow laugh. I also said I preferred cats to dogs. Turns out I'm wrong about a lot of things. Mick stood. We need to talk to Marla again. We'll find out who else knew about that file. Mack nodded, because someone's trying real hard to write a new ending to this mystery. And from the looks of it, they weren't finished yet. Chapter 5. A Stage for Deception. The grand ballroom being arranged for a panel discussion, complete with stiff-backed chairs, a modest stage, and a crowd of detectives too proud to admit they were eavesdropping on one another. The topic? The art of misdirection. How sleight of hand solves real crimes. Jean-Baptiste Lemaitre sat at center stage like a duchess presiding over tea, flanked by Rick Bannon, glowering and sipping something from a teacup that definitely wasn't tea, and Lord Fontley, who appeared to be mentally redecorating the ceiling. Mick and Mack stood in the back, arms crossed. I give it 5 minutes before Lemaitre refers to himself in the third person, Mack muttered. 3, Mick said. I know a guy with a stopwatch taking bets. The moderator cleared his throat. Monsieur Lemaitre, if you'd like to begin. Lemaitre leaned forward with a twinkle in his eye and malice in his smile. Ah, misdirection, he purred. The delicate art of convincing others to look where you are not. Like a magician's flourish, or a murder weapon placed just so. He let the words hang. In some cases, he continued, the murderer need only move a pen, leave a note, or, shall we say, arrive just late enough to appear innocent. Timing is everything. He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. I've always believed, he said, that's the best alibi is a good bath. There was a brief, scandalized cough from the moderator. Mick narrowed his eyes. Is he confessing? Mack shrugged. Or advertising, hard to tell. Fontley took over next, explaining how once, during a jewel theft in Monte Carlo, he had distracted 3 guards using only a champagne cork and a quote from Oscar Wilde. No one was sure what point he was making, but it was entertaining. Bannon, for his part, mumbled something about illusions being for people who didn't want to face the truth, then knocked over his water glass and left the stage. As the panel ended and the audience dispersed for coffee and small talk, Mick scanned the crowd. Where's Vicky? Johnny Chandler appeared at his side, tight-lipped. She was sitting front row. She said she was going to freshen up. Mick's gut clenched. A second later, a scream echoed down the hallway. Chairs scraped, cups clattered, and everyone stopped. Mick and Mack were the first out the door. They found a woman trembling by the coat check, pointing toward a side hallway. "There," a woman screamed, and someone pushed past me. I saw a scarf drop. At the end of the corridor, Mick knelt and picked up a silk scarf embroidered with a small VL in careful script. Mack stared at the monogram. "That's Vicky's." Johnny caught up, white-faced. "She's gone." Mick stood. "This isn't about a case anymore. It's personal," Mack growled. 15 minutes later, the impromptu search party gathered in the empty ballroom. "We'll cover more ground we split up," Mick said. "Staff areas, stairwells, freight elevators, every inch." "I'll check the kitchen," Johnny said, "and the staff break room." "I shall question the doorman," Lemaitre announced, already brushing lint from his lapels. "They remember me." "I'll check the wine cellar," Fontley said, loosening his cravat. "Possibly stay there." "Not without me," Bannon grunted. "I need a drink and a flashlight." "Take a bellhop," Mack called after them, "and try not to interrogate the soup." The group fanned out in chaotic formation, Lemaitre trailing Cologne in questions, Fontley stopping every 10 feet to admire the decor, Bannon mumbling about shadows and trust. Mick and Mack returned to the last place Vicky had been seen, inspecting every detail. A faint smudge in the wall, a small button, a scrap of torn fabric near a service door. "She fought," Mick said quietly. Mack looked down the corridor. "Whoever took her knew this place, knew how to vanish." Mick turned to him. "So now we find someone who doesn't want to be found." Glanced down at the scarf again, fingers tightening around the silk. "And we find her fast." Chapter 6. Case cracked and broken open. Vicky Langford blinked against a dim glow of an overhead bulb. The room, some kind of service pantry or staging area, was cluttered with linens, crates of bottled soda, and a neglected drinks cart. Her wrists were tied, but not well. She'd been untangling herself slowly, with the patience of someone who knew her captor and didn't mind drawing things out. Across from her, pacing like a villain auditioning for the second act, stood Marla Dubois. Hair tousled, mascara smudged, but still in heels. She clutched a small pistol like it was a prop she wasn't sure how to use. "You don't understand," Marla said. "He was going to ruin everything. Years of work, of recognition, my books, my reputation." "My name," Vicky said calmly, working a knot loose with her thumb. "It's on the scarf you left behind. You really think no one would figure it out?" "I panicked," Marla snapped. "I wasn't going to hurt you. I just needed time to get out before they put the pieces together." Vicky tilted her head. "So you admit it?" Marla stopped. "I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted to scare him, just shut him up. That file on Johnny, he was going to publish it. Claimed that my bestsellers were lifted from Chandler's case files." "They were," Vicky said. Marla stiffened. "I borrowed inspiration." "You broke into his safe," Vicky replied. "You used his own stationery. You signed the note MD, thinking it'd be poetic. But you didn't count on him locking the door behind you." Marla's eyes widened slightly. "You argued," Vicky continued. "Things got heated. He went for the phone and you, what, grabbed a letter opener? A gun?" Marla's hand shook. "It was supposed to be dramatic, not final." Vicky smiled sweetly. "And on that note..." She yanked her hands free, ducked low, shoved the drinks cart with all her strength. It barreled forward like a drunken waiter and collided with Marla, knocking the pistol from her grip and dousing her in ginger ale, vermouth, and a glass jar of maraschino cherries. The door burst open just as Marla was trying to pull herself upright using a crate of olives. "Nice timing, boys," Vicky said, brushing off her dress. Johnny rushed to her side, while Mick calmly picked up the pistol and turned it over. No safety on, he muttered. Amateur. Marla, Johnny said, staring at her. Why? She laughed bitterly. 'Cause you were too good, Johnny. I couldn't compete. So I stole the stories instead. Hope you'd at least change the endings, Vicky said. Not really, Marla replied. The endings were always the best part. Mick clicked the handcuffs on. They still are. Epilogue. The winner is. The final night of the convention went on as scheduled, because in the world of private investigators, nothing gets in the way of a good awards ceremony, not even attempted murder. Marla Dubois was led away quietly, wearing a trench coat borrowed from Lemaitre, who insisted it made for a better photo. In the ballroom, the atmosphere was tense, uncertain, until Mortimer Vale's replacement, a nervous assistant named Clive, took the stage and read from the final envelope. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the winners of this year's Private Investigators of the Year award are, he swallowed, Johnny Chandler and Victoria Langford. Applause erupted, genuine this time. Johnny stepped up to the stage, paused at the mic. I'd like to make something clear, he said. This award belongs to Vicky. She's the sharpest partner I could ever ask for. And if any of you still think she's just a secretary, I suggest you take up boxing. Vicky took the mic, smiling. Don't worry, I write all his speeches. Later, as the band played one last swing number, the sleuths drifted back to their rooms, Mick and Mack slipped out through the lobby unnoticed. I don't like award shows, Mick muttered. Too many speeches, not enough coffee. You say that every time someone gets married or murdered, Mack replied. Let's find a real diner. They stepped out in the cool Toronto night. Snow flurried gently. Just outside, Rick Bannon lit a cigarette under the awning and squinted at them. Next year, he rasped, let's hold it somewhere as normal. Like where, Mack asked. Bannon took a drag. Alcatraz. The end. This has been another episode of the Mick and Mack Mysteries on the Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. Stay tuned for more tales of murder, mischief, and mystery, straight from the streets of post-war Toronto. Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast, available wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Subscribe to Ontario Cold Cases today so you never miss an episode. Please share your thoughts and questions in the comments.